There are canyons, they are yawning in the night. They are rank and bitter anger, they are all devoid of light. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. Let us build a bridge of music, let us cross with a song. Let us span another canyon, let us write another wrong. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're off and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. We will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way.
We will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Thank you, Bill Staines, for allowing us to use that song on the air. My name is Jeff Beller, and Susan Colmont will be with us shortly. Right now we have Dennis Carius on the phone.
Hey, hi Jeff. Good to be on with you.
And Susan will be here soon. We are going to be talking about, of course, the Human Renewable Energy Measure, which will be on your screen in a few seconds. I just got to get over here and turn on the camera for this part of the program, and then we will see you guys. Okay, here now. I'm Jeff Beller, and then Susan will be sitting over here, and Dennis is on the phone. And if you look on your screen, you'll see the HREM, Human Renewable Energy Measure, and Bridges Programming, which is always nice to have up here. And we also have a nonprofit thing that we produce. It talks about Human Renewable Energy Measure. This is Wednesday morning, Wednesday World Call In. We're trying to encourage people to call in. We had a call from somebody from Peru last week, and we're going to be in contact with her, and she'll be on our program next Sunday. And the impotence behind this program is not to tell you all the problems, because we all know the problems in one form or another, whatever the truth is that people think they know, but the mainstream media tells us about. Whether it's true or not, it's hard to say. But we do know that every human being in this planet is working their butts off in some form or another, even the very wealthy. And that, Dennis, you call this a dysfunctional government. And we talked about this earlier today, that the reason why you have a dysfunctional government is because you have a dysfunctional economic system. And what's wrong with the economic system is it has no value for a human being. It has no value for nature. It's based on just money. That's man-made, just like man-made boundaries are. Now, that's sort of interesting. Dennis, yeah. You and I talked about earlier. We talked about different parts of the world and how did you put that? I forgot how you put that earlier. You said something about a dysfunctional government, but we do have a dysfunctional government, right?
Yes, I think right now we do have a dysfunctional government, and I really would like to reform things.
Well, when we say to you, how do you reform a dysfunctional government? And then you say, well, it's got to be campaign finance reform. And then you realize the people who are going to make the laws are the people who have got the dysfunctional governments working. Then the question then is, how do you do it?
Yes, you're right. And as a matter of fact, a man came over here from France in the 1830s. Alexis de Tocqueville said, I love your Constitution. I love this Bill of Rights, but I'm sorry, this is only going to last until the very, very rich people can do just what's happening right now. You know, it's like 99.9% of us being controlled by the richest, the most powerful upper 1/10 of 1%. And I'm not saying all of them are bad, but all you have to have is just a very small percentage that are greedy and they're billionaires and they want to become trillionaires. And if there's no limit to how you do it, you can say, oh, there's oil over in the Middle East. Oh, we can get that oil at a great price if we take that democratically elected leader out, like we did in Iran, put the Shah of Iran in there, and get a great price on oil. But when we talk about this word called terrorism, we actually could be provoking so much terrorism, like Saudi Arabia, number 6 on the list of dictators in the whole world, and they get most of their weapons from countries like us. We get a great price on oil. But I mean, we're told on 9/11, out of 19 hijackers, 15 out of 19 were from Saudi Arabia. So it's like, my God, we could be provoking terrorism by taking their democratically elected leader out and replacing him with a dictator so that we can get a good price on oil. Would we like to have that done in our country? I know I don't want President Barack Obama to be taken out by some other country and then replaced by a dictator so that that country can get, a good price on what's under the ground over here.
Well, okay, Dennis, now I'm going to ask you, first I'm going to make a statement. So what are you going to do about it, is one.
Well, I can answer that very quickly. I want to reform things if they ever get dysfunctional.
Okay, how are you going to do that?
Well, the HREM is a good start.
You mean you want to put a measurement in place that we can judge people on the way they can handle the population so they become functional?
Right, where everybody would have the food and shelter and education that is required. And in our country, actually started doing that.
Well, you miss an important part. Everybody alive today is getting their food and shelter and education.
Everybody alive today
in the world
is getting what?
Their food, shelter, and education.
So why did all the thousands of children die over in Africa? I was told
because they weren't getting their food and shelter and education, and they were massacred. So the question is, there is a missing statement there. If everybody is getting their food and shelter and education who's alive today, and let's say a small portion of the population is massacred, this is a pretty functional world, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't put it in capital letters, F, functional.
Well, okay, so I would put it in capital letters and call it something or other. I guess I would call it, is this a functional government or not? I guess it's not. Everybody don't like that.
Right, good, I agree with that.
Well, the reason, what you're missing though, we should be getting our education, food, and shelter for about an hour's worth of labor. Our minimum needs met. We're getting our minimum needs met around the world to stay alive, but it's taking people 16 and 20 hours a day to survive, like in the Golden Heights or Syria or Africa or Indonesia. And well, China's even now picking up. They don't work quite so hard anymore, but they still have a huge amount of energy, which is human renewable energy. And they are working many, many hours for that, but they don't have the measurement in place yet. So the problem is the measurement. Without the measurement, you can't get a functional government. that works for the people. It's only going to work for the very wealthy, and that's very functional for the very wealthy. Now, I don't know whether it's 1/10 of 1% or 1% or 3%. I have no idea. I don't know if I believe in mainstream media with those numbers. So that's my problems. I don't know if I really don't have all the answers. I have some ideas that may be the answers. And I think that without an economic measurement to make sure all humanity has their basic needs met for a minimal amount of their time, then we really can't do too much about that, could we?
Well, haven't we started, Jeff, already in this country? Even if the parents are unemployed, their children still get free grade school and free high school. Correct?
It's not free though, Dennis. It's not part of the. And I'll tell you, for instance, if I go to a very affluent area, let's say Bethlehem, that has a lot of money in Bethlehem. That's a town in New York State, and they have very, very good schools. So a lot of parents move to that area because the schools are very good. But if I move to Arbor Hill, New York, the schools aren't as good in downtown Albany because the parents, the tax structure, and there's not enough money there to support better schools. So when you say free schools, it is still paid for by the tax structure and people working. So they're not really free. Now then when you go on to college, and it's even more elitist than that. You need to have a lot of money to go to college. Now some people, because of our let's say our minds or our consciences, we have to allow poor people to do it too, so we have scholarships. So maybe 2% or a small percentage of the colleges allow people to come in who have no money, but they have to pass certain criteria. They have to conform to the rules. And if you go to, let's say, Larry Whitner's book on Aardvark University, he was on one of our programs, and he explains that the big corporations are taking over our colleges and our schools. And if you look to see who's paying the school bills, it's the tax structure, which is the affluent people. And then you have our government coming into our high schools and trying to recruit our kids to join the services so they can control the world, so they can get natural resources for the corporations. Now, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but does that make what I just say make sense?
Yes. And I want to say hi to Susan. I just saw her walking behind you. I know she's not sitting next to you yet.
No, she's actually getting ready for the second part or the next portion of the program. Now I'm gonna put on a little bit of I'm gonna change the scenery here and show people how beautiful this part of the world is. And this is not, by the way, an affluent part of Florida. This is a very poor area of Florida, but you can make any area. It doesn't have to have a lot of money. You can make it beautiful if you have the time to take care of your stuff. Now, this is outside in a very poor town in our backyard. Now, if you notice it's pretty simple. Not a lot of traffic, not a lot of people, just some birds in the background, just trees, some moss blowing in the wind a little bit. You'll see that going if the wind picks up a bit. So can you see that in the background there?
Yes, I can see that very well.
And you notice there's a statue on the right-hand side of the screen.
Let's see. I'm looking for the statue right now. I don't see a statue.
It looks like a blue heron or a silver herring, a silver bird. There's a stalk. You see the point of the stalk on the right corner, right-hand lower corner.
The lower left. The lower left. I guess maybe that's just part of the tree.
Lower right.
It's possible that what's on the screen is not everything. Well, you might have a larger screen than what I'm seeing here.
No, you'll see it on the lower right of the screen. You will see a blue heron. And I can probably go out there and touch it for you later. I can do that now if you will. When Susan gets here, I'll go out and touch that. But meanwhile, that's where we are. It's a beautiful part of the world. And I find that no matter where we go, there are always beautiful parts of the world, providing that you have the time to work on it, the time to make it neat, the time to make sure your nature is taken care of, you're working with nature. And that's one of the things we need to talk about. That, remember you said that, what we talked about before the show, which is interesting. We talked about an all-you-can-eat buffet. Remember we talked about that?
Right, yes.
And we said that and we talked about Native American Indians and how we came in and we took them over and we killed them and tortured them and threw them out and took them as slaves, right?
Yeah.
And then we're doing that all over the world, by the way, because we want the slavery, because the slavery, if I am stronger than you and I can make you work for me, and I'm using you as energy, units of energy, human energy, they're slaves, and I beat you and I make you work for me, or vice versa, someone comes in stronger than me and makes me work for them, or they do it subtly, like in the form of tax structure, or the form of coercion through our economic system, which tells us to go out and go shopping and buy stuff in Walmart and go into debt for schools. That's the same form of slavery it's the same thing, but different ways. And you don't feel as though you're a slave. Most people, pretty stupid people, as a matter of fact, believe that everything is going along so great. Just keep on killing people and we'll be fine. And they're part of the problem, because they're like, if you look at that, we're going to close our borders off to other people. Well, the borders are man-made borders. We are in one simple, if you look at this country as though it was a large mansion in the sky, as some religious people puts it, and we have 200 rooms, a bit more or less, in our mansion, and we start to kill people in each room, because each room's a different country, and there's 7 billion people in our mansion, and they flee from one room to the other in the hallways, and they can't get their food and shelter or their education. We would have a big problem in our house, wouldn't we?
Yes, it's very interesting. There's when we say love thy neighbor as thyself, not just we say thou shalt not kill. Our Bible says love thy neighbor as thyself. The Hindus, I'm with a group called the Interfaith Alliance, and the Hindus say love thy neighbor as thyself, for thy neighbor is thyself.
Right.
Right. Imagine if we had the same. If you and I were brothers, or Susan was my sister, and we had the same parents, we would be, we would not want to do anything that would hurt the other person. Well, if you go way back in time, let's just say we start with Adam and Eve, go way, way, way back in time. Well, we all are brothers and sisters, if you look at it that way, correct?
I would say to you that. Now I'm gonna do something differently, because Bucky Fuller, we listened to Bucky's yesterday. We resurrect Bucky through his books. We have a skeleton that we bring out. We dress him up as Bucky and we call him Bucky and we have him talk. But Bucky believes and he's a scientist. And he says yesterday he was saying that there is some form of God, because God has rules. God gives us our nature gives us our million calories of food a year, a million calories of water a year. It gives us a brain to understand what we're doing, and then it also gives us a conscience. And Bucky's thinking that if you look at the rules of God or rules of nature,
or the rules of the universe,
or the rules of the universe, universal law,
well,
those are not man-made law. Those are laws of nature, or laws of God, or laws of the universe. So Bucky, in his wisdom, was talking about actual laws, that not man-made laws that are phony, that don't really work well. They're controlled by the people who want to be greedy or want to be taking over stuff. But those laws are real. They're very much real, and that's what we're lacking in our economic system. Now, what I'm suggesting is, so I just want to look at this. Remember, I talked about the house. Now, supposing all of us in this big mansion, we have a meeting room, and we all bring to the meeting room a little bit of food, enough for us to eat, that, and a little more for we can share with other people. And we all bring all this kind of different foods with us, right? And then we take these foods and we share them. We don't try to take more than we brought. We don't try to take all of one type because we like it and someone else shouldn't have any. We take a little taste of everything like we do in buffets, and we don't hoard it. We are working in cooperation with the rest of the people in that buffet or the rest of the people in that mansion. Well, why don't we look at this planet or this world? They're all separate rooms just because we have to know where people are. Not because there should be different laws in these rooms. It's all the same laws. They're laws of nature. And we, instead of working in competition, we work in cooperation. And we share our recipes with other people. And we share our technologies with other people. And once we've done that, we have a peaceful world. The only way to do that, though, is with a simple measurement. And the measurement is called the renewable energy, the human renewable energy measure, HREM.org. By the way, we got our first donation because of the show.
Oh, for Renew the Earth.
For Renew the Earth. And
Thank
that's
you.
A nonprofit. Thank you for the donation. And that helps because it cost us, we figured it cost us at least $5,000 to $7,000 a year to run these programs. And it's going to cost us more as we go on. But we need to get these programmings moving forward to promote the concept, the renewable energy measure, the human renewable energy measure. And if we can get that into the language, then we can measure how well human beings work in cooperation with one another, not in competition with one another. And therefore,
wow.
And that's
I
important.
can see that.
What's that?
On the screen, not just Jeff and Susan on the screen, but at the bottom of the screen, it even says Bridges Programming, and it gives the website, the address that I can go to, bridgesprogramming.org. It's
And
right
Renew the Earth.
And Renew the Earth.
.org.
Renewtheearth.org. Go right to that. And the goal is not to raise money like they do on all the NPR shows to keep it perpetuating. What you could do, what everyone could do, is first of all think about what we're saying and try to understand it, which is hard to do in this world because we're so busy worshiping money or the golden calf as they did many, many thousands of years ago. We want to get back to 5,000 years ago. And Bucky said the same thing. We didn't know Bucky said that till recently, but he said the same thing. 5,000 years ago, we worked in cooperation, and we don't want to be in competition. And once we've done that, the way we do that is we need to take up not arms with guns, but we need to arm ourselves with education and use the technology that we can to talk to people wherever we can. And even if you don't have a computer and you heard this program somewhere, then please go into your local churches or gin mill or wherever people gather and say there's something called the human renewable energy measure, that all humanity has their basic needs met for 1 hour of time of their life a day out of the 80 years they'll live. And then if they have things they want, they have 23 more hours to accomplish those wants if they choose to do that. So it's totally free choice, just like nature intended. And then we can use our God-given brain or our nature-given brain to work differently. And I've always said to people, I'm not religious, but I do have some belief there's something bigger than I am. And Bucky confirmed that yesterday in Critical Path. So this is something that's really amazing stuff, because I don't consider myself a religious person. I don't believe in organized religion, because I think most organized religions are a way of dividing humanity up. We're all people under the same roof. We're all the same. We all need our basic needs met, otherwise we die, and nature does that. So it's really important to try to get this concept out to all people, that in all languages, all human beings should have their basic needs met for an hour of their life. Now, Susan's probably got something to say, which is great, because it gets my voice off this.
Oh, well, I'm going to follow up on what you were saying about people in cooperation
Oh,
with each
sure,
other.
go ahead.
And I'm going to preface that because I just read something, and this is in she's a wonderful novelist, Pearl S. Buck, and this book by her
Let me
is
show
The
it up a
Living.
little closer if you can.
Let's see,
You can see that on the.
The Living Reed, and it's about Korea before it became North and South Korea as we perceive it today, which is
By the way,
not for you know,
Korea was once one country,
of course,
and then they divided it up between North and
After-
South Korea
yeah,
after the war.
after World War II.
Now did Korea ever change? Did the physical boundaries change by nature? No, man made the boundaries. So we built a petition up in our minds between the between North and South Korea.
Right.
Amazing. That's what we're doing. And then when we divide a country up, we control. Divide and conquer is the way military terms are. And we don't want to be military, don't want to conquer. We want to work in cooperation. Okay.
Now here's something that, and this is interesting. Last night we were reading through Critical Path, and I was reading some of the excerpts from it to Jeff, and then I went back into the toward the end of the book, and he makes a list of all of the technical accomplishments in order of date of humanity up to about 1979, when I guess he completed this book. And so it was very interesting. And I'd heard this before, but I don't know if everybody, who's listening right now knows this. But in Korea, they invented the system of movable type, the printing process, essentially. And that was back in the year 1390 AD. So you're talking about
1,000 years
about 1400 AD. Metal type, first movable type, and that was, Korea, incredibly artistic and creative people. I'm sure that heritage is still there. It just doesn't disappear, and so that just keeping that in mind. I've been reading this book, The Living Reed, and Pearl Buck. She lived in Korea and Japan. She was I think her husband was at the Foreign Service or something, but she spent a great deal of her life there. And being a writer, she was extremely observant, and she was very curious about the history and the people, and compiled this book, which is a fictional. But using the history as she understood it, as she learned it locally and through her research. And of course, as we know, history is always suspect, because even something that you've lived through and you ask somebody else, maybe your partner or maybe your relative, what happened, and you'll both have
prove this, Dennis.
Different ideas of what happened.
A few minutes ago, what did we talk about?
Many things.
Good for you.
But what specifically did we talk about?
Well, I mean, specifically, we talked about many things. Can you just give me a hint?
Well, see, this is the problem, is that your perception of what we spoke about and my perception of what we spoke about will be a little different. So even in a few minutes ago, history doesn't actually tell you what really went on. It's vague, and it can be manipulated by the people who are writing the history book.
And usually history is written or rewritten or rewritten and rewritten and rewritten, depending on what the powers that be want the population to perceive. So, right now the population is being asked to perceive Korea as, the evil North Korea and the not evil South Korea. And you don't need to know any more about Korea, but you do. You need to understand that this is an ancient civilization. It's only been divided since World War II. Thousands and thousands of years of accomplishment, creativity, artistic, poetic, intellectual technology, technologically, and you can go. I mean, at one time I was at the Natural History Museum in the Smithsonian, and there was this wonderful diorama depicting how the heating systems that were invented by Koreans, and this would be probably around 15,000 BC AD again, or earlier, that they were building floors above subchambers that were heated so that the heat would come up through the floor from their cooking area, which was a little lower down. So all the heat was trapped from cooking, and then ducts were created to take it under the floor, and the floor was made out of a composite that was brilliant. It was actually I can't remember it right now, but it was a composite of some kind that was then highly polished. And the living room and the bedrooms were all, on this level, this floor, and underneath all that heat was coming up and warming, those chambers. And I mean, this is an incredibly interesting.
But there's so many cultures, like the Aztec culture. You have all kinds of cultures.
And every culture has its accomplishments. But whenever you see a situation where you're being asked to think that some group is somehow,
superior,
Stone Age, or another one is superior, that you're being lied to. And so you're being lied to, about what it means to be Muslim. You're being lied to about who terrorists are and why they're terrorists. You need to be much more discerning about this. But anyways,
and the easiest way to do this is that you remember
make up your own mind.
Every human being in the world has the same.
And if you hear somebody like Donald Trump saying, we got to keep everybody out, that you're being lied to. He's
just plain. If he believes it, he's just wrong, because his needs are the same needs of the people he's talking about. His wants are pretty much the same wants. Of course, they're grandiose because he has money. But his needs are the same needs. His hurts are the same hurts. His lifestyle, as far as death, he will die the same way as everybody else. He is just as vulnerable as any other human being on the planet. We're all the same, according to nature and according to God. Now, our wants are different depending upon our upbringing and our belief systems. We have to make sure we all come together as a human species.
Okay, we're
That's
talking
what
about
the human renewable
cooperation again. Now you come
means.
back to what I wanted to talk about, cooperation. And we're not encouraged to cooperate with each other normally, at least not in the Western countries and in Europe and the United States and who knows where else. But, there's more cooperation in the Eastern countries like China and Japan and Korea, which I'm going to get back to here. But the thing about cooperation is that there's a lot of ways that people say, well, how are you going to cooperate with someone who's evil? How are you going to cooperate? So that your populations are being divided just on that thought that is often couched in some quasi-religious belief, which is not most. No, I don't know of any religion that dictates that people, some of them, I guess, some sects say you're born evil, right?
Right.
But I don't know. I've
Some
read a lot
some
of
religion says that you're born evil.
Yeah, but those are like offshoots.
And I don't believe
and
that.
if you do that, right away you are not in a position to advocate cooperation, because you're looking for the evil people and to defend yourself against them. But if you don't have that in mind as your precedent, that there are people born evil, or everybody's born evil, or whatever, and we have to somehow keep that under control. If that is, if you have some room, some wiggle room there in your mental belief system, then the possibility of cooperation can arise. And in this book, by Pearl Buck, The Living Reed, there's a young man who's got very young children, and one of them is a little more aggressive than the other. I think she's setting it up as like a Cain and Abel situation where, the older son is, has these violent tendencies, and the younger son is, a pacifist. And so she probably had some religious background that was, influencing her storytelling. But then this is a part of this is where the young father is saying to his more aggressive son, he's saying, look, he noticed that his son goes and he destroys what the little boy, the younger son, is doing. He'll knock it over, or he'll destroy it. And he's fascinated by violence, and he's interested in how a cat can pounce on a little creature and eat it. And these things interest him. And he's saying, it's not enough. In fact, the wife observes something too, but the young father says it's easy to destroy, but it's hard to create. And then, says, do not destroy what your brother creates. And then his wife says to the young father later, she says, it's not enough merely to indicate to your son that he shouldn't destroy. Why not help him create something himself?
Right.
That's very, very wise.
I want to bring something else out, that we know a fair amount of people, and they're really nice people. There's nothing wrong with them, but they really can't seem to create anything. They're very easy at messing things up and destroying things,
or criticizing. That's another way.
And criticizing people.
Right.
But they're very difficult to try to say, listen,
let's try to do something together.
Let me help you get together so we can help all of us. And the people who have trouble, and it's a real problem. They don't want to mess things up. They don't want to criticize, but they don't know any other way. The reason when you hear, they don't know any other way of changing it. So the way someone who's vicious, or who's part of your Dennis's 1% or 1/10 of 1%, the way they fix the thing is by destructive things, dropping bombs on people. The way they take things back to make themselves with a better quality of life is to kill another person, to hurt them. The same way you would talk about Cain and Abel, or you talk about this saying that this young writer or this writer is talking about. So it's the same thinking process. What I'm trying to show is the similarities in all humanity's thinking. We all have the same thinking processes in some form or another. The question is,
if you look for them,
if you come together, we come together as a species. We don't and understand that this is not separate countries or even separate rooms. It's under one house.
And we are constantly learning from each other, even though there are all these divisions, because humans know on a certain level of understanding, worldwide understanding, if there's a good idea, they will pick it up. They'll pick it up and then modify it to their own needs if they have contact to learn about it. And now we have so much opportunity for that because of the internet. We all can, learn a great deal from each other, and very quickly. And that's why, all of this kind of division is so obsolete now. It should be, disappearing
we could
rapidly.
Easily come together as a species and stop killing one another. The only thing stopping us is the way our economic system works. It's not even politics or mainstream media. It's our economic system which controls the mainstream media. It controls the political system around the world. It controls the wars. We need to come together as a species with a measurement that says all human beings must have their basic needs met for 1 hour of their life a day. Should be, and it may even be less down the road if we come together, because we can build machines, better machines that do things to make labor, the object of labor is to gain leisure. Somebody else said that. I forget who famous quote that was, but it's true. If I go ahead and I don't have a car and I build myself a car or a wheel, I can do things easier. So my labor to build myself the tool makes my life easier. So I would spend the time building my tool to make my life better and give myself more free time. With the more free time I have, I figure out better tools, and better tools give me more free time and a better quality of life. But what's happening is the small percentage of the population is controlling those tools and controlling my quality of life, because they're taking my inventions away from me and they're charging me
and making profit off of them, and that's the motivation to steal ideas. And Buckminster Fuller refers to that, and that's why he did patent most of his ideas, because he knew that if it was a good one, that some company was going to try to steal it and make money off of it, and he didn't want that kind of impact on good ideas to be so easy to happen, so easy to come by. And he talks to this same issue of how easy it is to destroy. He said, quote, "Ideas are easy to come by. Reduction to practice is an arduous but inspirationally rewarding matter." That's the next step. How hard someone will work to take an idea to a practical application. And first there's the inspiration of the idea, but then there's the whole activity that can take many, many years and sometimes a lifetime that develops that, and then finally gives it to the world to do with as they wish. And if it's a good thing, the world, other people will pick it up, and the species will use it to advantage our human species. Going back to The Living Reed by Pearl Buck, where she talks on page 160 about the young father is speaking to his son, and he's telling him about a Korean map maker who was one of their ancestors. And so this would be, there's no date here, but we're talking about the present in this book is just before World War II. So he's talking about an ancestor who was probably back in the 1500 AD. And he's saying, this ancestor of ours asked everyone where he could find a map of our country, which would tell him all these things. There was no such map. He promised himself then that he would be a map maker when he grew up, and he studied every map he could find, traveling here and there to see whether the maps were true. They were not true. Mountains and rivers were in confusion, and the shorelines were straight where they should be curved into bays and coves, and the sources of the rivers were only imagined. When he was a man, he came here to Seoul and asked the rulers to help him, but no one cared for maps or knew of their usefulness. He was discouraged, but he did not give up. He traveled everywhere again, measuring, drawing pictures, writing down what he found until he had made the first complete map of Korea. Then it had to be printed. So this was around the printing time, so that would be 1500 AD.
Right, 1500
Still,
AD.
no one helped him, and he worked and saved and bought blocks of wood and carved the shape of the map upon them. He inked these blocks and stamped them on paper, and there was the map. Alas, the king in those times only thought that our ancestor was helping some enemy, and he had the maps burned with blocks and the blocks of wood. But our ancestor had memorized the map, and then the king decided that he should be killed, and he was
Right.
beheaded. So
That'll teach
Here's
you to
what,
think. That'll
right,
teach you to
but
think.
also here's the fear stepping in the form of the king. The king is saying, "Oh, that if there's a map, then everybody will know where everything is, and they'll come in and destroy us. We don't want an accurate map. We want them to get lost, literally." So there's these two things, and so yes, he was killed, and the little boy says they cut off his head, and he said there must have been much blood. And the father says, "Doubtless, but that's not important. I tell the story because I want you to know of our ancestor and how brave he was to create something so good and useful as a map, and how foolish it was to destroy him. Even the king was ignorant."
Especially the king is ignorant.
So that's an interesting, there's always a good bad reason for someone to destroy.
Right.
And then there's, the huge effort that it took to create, this thing that is finally easy to destroy.
Because
Very
all the
easy
guy
to
wanted
destroy.
to do is set up.
All they have to do is chop his head off.
What all he wanted to do is set up a simple measure, a simple map to show
And he
people where they
understood.
are.
And he
And he
understood the
understood
value
it was
of
so
that.
important of a map. So we know how to go from where we are to there, and that's where the
benefits of
but
that.
that's where the HRM comes in. It's a
the map
start
for the
point.
economic
It's
system.
a map for the economic system. Here's where we are. Here's what has to be done. All humanity has to have their basic needs met for 1 hour a day worldwide, and that's where our economic system starts from. And then you don't have a dysfunctional economic system. You don't have a dysfunctional government. You have a functional government to help humanity because we know where we are and where we would like to go. Does that make sense to you, Dennis?
Oh, yes, Jeff. I mean, we've already started that in our country when you talk about not just food and shelter, but even education, because we have free grade school and free high school. Even if parents are unemployed, I understand there's taxes to everybody, but if the parents are unemployed, we have free grade school and free high school in this country. But what's really sad is when that child graduates from high school, the average age is 18 years old. That's the same age when you can go into the military. And college is so expensive.
But let me go back to the free high school and the free grammar school and grade school. The people who are going to those schools, there's totally different levels depending upon how much money or how affluent that community is. So it's not really free. If your kid grows up in a poor neighborhood, in a poor part of this country, they get a really lousy education. And if they go into a good, affluent neighborhood, they get a much better education. So you can't say it's free. It's not equal. It's not free. It's not at all. If it was actually part of our society, which you're saying it is, what you're saying our society says that you will have college, you will have kindergarten, grade school, and high school, so you can get to further yourself better, to be smarter for our society. Well, it's not making them smarter for the society. It's making them smarter to be workers for the society, to make the economic system grow. If it was truly free or truly part of our society, you wouldn't have a disparity in the educational system. So you be careful when you say it's free, because there is nothing in this society, because of our lack of knowing where we are in our world, is free. Our economic system controls everything, and until we know where we are in our economic system, there's always going to be a major cost. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I hear you, but be careful when you say that about being free, because if you go from, let's say you're in high school, and it is so easy when you graduate high school and you go to college, you can do 95% of your work right over the internet. Whatever major you want, you can learn that on the internet. Your teacher only has to do 5% of the work by saying, hey, You've got to come take a test.
Okay, so to do what you're saying to do, you need something else that's free. And what do you think that free is?
Give me a hint.
Time, free time to do that. So if you have an economic system that allows you, affords you the free time to educate yourself, yes, you be a system, an economic system that says we will make sure you have internet in your, the best technology of education, which is internet in your grasp, and you will have the free time, the time in life to educate yourself. Those are real free things, providing the economic system affords you that. And right now, the economic system doesn't afford you that because you don't know where we are in our economic system. We all agree, by the way, we have an agreement that we all should have education, food, and shelter for all. But we don't have an agreement on how much time it should take to get that. For basic needs met, not wants, it should take about an hour, according to people who study this. I don't know if they're right or wrong. It's mainstream understanding. It takes about an hour a day. However, your wants are different. You may want to not have children and have, you love animals, so you have animals. You may love children and want to have lots of children. You have to educate yourself on that. That's your own education, it's your own preferences. And all humanity should have or could have the ability for their own wants. The problem here is we don't have the time, the ability to have time, because the economic system is controlling everything. So with the HREM, that gives us the ability to have the measurement to allow people to have that free time. And
can I ask you a question, Jeff?
Please.
Oh, good, because I know you're going to say this is unrelated to what we're talking about. I think this is very related to what we're talking about. Are you surprised that all these years, these decades, when we send our troops into Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, we never have to ask where those troops are coming from? I mean, you and I, would not be happy. Nobody listening to this program would be happy to say, I want to join the Army or the Navy or the Air Force for 4 years. But the reason we never have to ask where the troops are coming from, because at age 18, when after free grade school and free high school, college is so expensive that 18-year-old says, how can I afford to go to college? And that's when they were told, look, just go overseas for 4 years. It doesn't matter if it's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. It doesn't matter. When you come back here, you'll be able to afford it. That's why we don't have to ask where the troops are coming from. But the bad news is some of those kids don't even come back home if they're killed over there. And some of them come back home. It's so sad. They kill themselves. The rate of suicide is so high because they come back here and they're going to church with their family and they're told, love thy neighbor, thou shalt not kill. And they're thinking, oh my God, what did I do over there? I can't believe they told me to go in there and kill everybody in there. Not just the men and the women, even the children. So I'm just saying that it sounds like it's not related to that question, but I think that's why we have free grade school and free high school. But when a kid is 18 years old, that's why college is so expensive, because we got to get those troops to come over, even if people
So what you're saying, we are charged. You're saying even though the word free high school and kindergarten and grade school is not really free, it's based on tax structure and affluence. And then the affluent people, by the way, can afford to put their children into school where the poor people can't. So we say to them, you donate your 4 years of your life to killing other people. And then, of course, you'll have mixed emotions because you know that killing people is wrong. So, so we're going to send you over there to make sure you shoot your neighbor across the street. Kill thy neighbor is what they're saying. Of course, your neighbor doesn't mean he's overseas. That's part of your neighbor as well. So you're killing your neighbor overseas just like you're killing your neighbor next door. But when you kill your neighbor overseas, the economic system is applauding you for that because you're giving them money. You're giving them a better quality of life, where you yourself are taking other lives using your life. So you're not saying it's free education because you go over there. You're saying you're donating your life and your whole essence of your being and breaking all the rules of your belief systems as far as a human being to join that service to kill other people. Is that right?
Right, exactly. That's what's so dysfunctional about this system, because if you've got free grade school and free high school, college should definitely be free, because you can go on the internet. These kids that graduate high school are smart enough.
Okay, let me ask you a question. What's the point? What's your point of going to getting an education? Why would you want to do that?
Oh no, well, I should ask somebody who's talking about the HREM, because it's not just food and shelter. They're saying you should have free education.
But why would you want to? Why would any human being want to educate themselves?
Oh, well, to me, I mean, that to me is a simple answer. I just want to know the truth. I really want to know what's going on.
But why would you want to go to school to educate yourself if the school may be corrupted?
And really, I don't think the schools would be corrupted. If we could reform a dysfunctional government, the schools would not be corrupted at all.
So we just went ahead and we chased our tail, didn't we? Because we just went around in a circle. The point of education is to educate yourself to be a better member of society worldwide. And that's what Susan was talking about with Korea. They designed all these great things, and one person educated himself.
Now, the only way that we perceive Korea in this present history is as a divided country, and with half of it evil and half of it good. And this is a symptom of our times. There's got to be evil people, and we got to get rid of them, and we're, of course, the good people that need to be preserved. This kind of a thinking process is extremely dangerous, and does and has, when it's happened in history in the past to extremes, it's always around. But when it gets into an extreme, where we're even hearing in our little neighborhood here recently, a neighbor who's just on the next street over, he's got a megaphone or some kind of broadcasting system over there, and he's broadcasting the comments. I don't even know who the comment. I'm not going to give him credibility, but he's an extremely aggressive hate information about Islam and Muslims and what ISIS is, and he's broadcasting this around the neighborhood from his house. I mean, really, really loud. This is a recent occurrence. So there are, there is a certain level now that's starting to affect people who are extremely vulnerable. The ones that are extremely vulnerable to this kind of propaganda are starting to, do their bizarre thing, in local neighborhoods. And this is a disturbing thing, and then when people start using a spray can and writing horrible messages on people's houses, that's starting to happen too. So we need to understand these what these symptoms indicate, and be brave enough to say that's not where we should be working hard. We should be working hard at dividing energy. It all comes down to energy.
You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.
Sponsored by the Union Renewable Energy Network.
Fossil fuel affects our lives like ripples on a lake. Cars and farms and factories and trucks. Supplies go down, the prices soar, our futures are at stake. And when it's gone, it won't come back, and we'll be out of luck. So energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. We can get our energy from corn and grass and trees. Even trash converts to biofuels. Break loose from the stranglehold of oil companies. Renewables can fuel the world. We're here to spread the news of energy. Energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy.